I would like to kick off today's discussions to thank all of you for joining us. Please, again, do not hesitate to send us questions throughout the event via the chat. And with that, please let me introduce the Deputy Ambassador of Colombia, who will give some opening remarks to kick off today's event and the launch of our bioenergy, enabling bioenergy finance and investments in Colombia report. Gloria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. As I understand, there is as you already explained, there is interpretation to English, so I will switch to Spanish. So, muy buenos días para todos ustedes. Muy buenas tardes.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon here in Paris. It is a great moment for us here in our delegation. And of course, for Colombia, you know that the team here, the Colombian delegation at the OECD, we have been working with the environmental division. We want to thank Dr. Olasi that is here. And of course, all the work that has been coordinated through CEFIM. So I would like to thank Cecilia, John, Laila. It is a work that is very important for us, particularly because of the quality and the enthusiasm that you have supported the countries in this program. Without any doubt, the transition towards the carbon neutral economy requires a coordinated action of cooperation strategies to be aligned with the private sector, especially with the finance strategies. Without any doubt, this is one of the approaches of this program. As I said, it is very important, in particular for emerging economies, so we can be more attractive for investors and of course, to attract foreign investment. So the fact that the program may be tailored to the needs of each country, I think this is something very important that must be underscored. In our case, you know that Colombia is committed to the goals towards the reduction of a greenhouse gas effect and to use non-conventional renewable energy, to have international organizations precisely to increase all these actions according to what has been agreed in the Paris Agreement. So the Ministry of Mines and OECD under this CEFIM program, we started precisely to see how this work may be aligned, and in one way or the other to try not to double efforts that we are making. So this is first of all, we want to give this report on how to attract investment to the bioenergy sector. This is some of the work that in the field of bioenergy we will be supporting, and we will be supported by OECD. And in that sense, I think that the recommendation, it's precisely very important to look at the strategies that are being developed by our government. The synergy, the government of Colombia presented the strategy of the circular economy. We have the stable mission. So all this work is helping Colombia to develop a work area for the potential is very important, and I want to thank CEFIM program, the environmental section here directed by Rodolfo Lassi, and all the work will benefit will have a benefit from better policies and for the benefit of all Colombians. Thank you very much once again. So I'm going to give the floor to Rodolfo and then to our Vice Minister Miguel Otero, I think that he left a video because he will not be able to connect. So Rodolfo Lassi, the director of the Environmental Division of OECD, I give you the floor. Thank you very much, Gloria. I want to thank everyone to share this report launch of CEFIM. We have this program. It is a program, it's an international program that started in the South Asia, and we are now, for the first time, representing our progress in Latin America. For several years now, I would say, we wanted to approach the challenge that Latin America has to change fossil fuels for clean energy. Colombia is a country that is leading the use of clean energy, particularly the hydro, but they have bioenergy resources that are quite wide. So the investment for these type of resources is important, is strategic, more now than ever. I apologize, this is not the topic that is convenient, but I was listening to the opening of the National Energy Organization. A common voice among everyone is that it's necessary to take this opportunity. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine is a tragedy, but we need to have a leap towards clean energies and not to depend on fossil fuels. And the president of this ministerial meeting said that we cannot sequester sand or wind, and that is going to give us more security. So I will add the fact that the energy is going to give us more security in the development of our nations and the independence of our nations, what they may have with respect to managing natural resources. I would like to thank the support given by the government of Colombia for this project and for this report, both from the Ministry of Mines and Energy, as well as of the National Planning Department, as well as the Institute of Planning and Promotion of Energy Solutions and solutions to the non-connected zones. Maybe I'm translating from English into Spanish the names, so I apologize for this distraction. But what is important for us is that we were able to do it thanks to the group of people in OECD, the delegation of Colombia at the OECD here in Paris. We want to thank the Minister Robledo, Gloria, for her support and for providing us the coordination support, the support to be able to carry out the interviews and to have the case study and to have the contact with experts so as to be able to start having a diagnosis about what was necessary or what is necessary to do in Colombia in order to improve mobilization of financial resources in the bioenergy sector, in the whole set of possibilities that Colombia has. I think that Colombia is one of the markets that are more rapidly is being incorporating renewable energy. Evidently, all the wide range of possible energies, it's exporting coal, but it's fossil fuels. But the intention the government has explicitly in their goals of having the carbon and to reduce the carbon footprint in the country and to have a resilient development, not to produce greenhouse gas effect and not contaminant gases. So it is very important, and that is the engine that will move this initiative. I think that it is also important to say that we will try as OECD to replicate these experiences, because this is a project about, it is a project that will have as an aim in the Latin American region, synergies between the Latin American countries, so as to be able to have a massive application of clean technologies that are not technologies developed in these countries. We need to transfer them with the business models that will be creative, innovative, and that will help us generate wealth, generate clean jobs, and to improve our environmental conditions. I think from the energy mix in Latin America, many things will change in the next 2 decades because the users are going to change as well. Many companies in the transportation industry are modifying their cars, the trucks, the ships, even airplanes for cleaner energy, hydrogen, electricity, and that will require generation. But the service sector, the tourism sector, and other productive sectors, agriculture, cattle raising, they will be needing renewable energy and to decrease contamination or pollution. It is a fundamental step for Colombia and for all countries in Latin America that belong to OECD and those that are in the process of entering into OECD, such as Brazil. So this is going to be a first effort, a first strategic effort on our side, but also in collaboration with Colombia, so as to share knowledge and good practices in the environmental aspect in Latin America. Thank you very much. I think we will have a video. Thank you very much. A video by the Vice Minister.
Un saludo muy especial para todos los asistentes a este evento y de manera particular a nuestra embajadora de la misión en la OCDE, la doctora Gloria Alonso. Quiero agradecer de manera particular a la organización y a su programa de movilización de las inversiones y financiamiento de las energías limpias, porque gracias a su apoyo pudimos hoy tener con los resultados de este importante estudio de bioenergía. Un estudio que se ha concentrado fundamentalmente en 2 aspectos. Primero, en la utilización de bagazo de caña para la generación de energía eléctrica como para la generación de calor en la industria de caña y también para entregar excedentes a nuestro sistema interconectado nacional. Y segundo, para fomentar el uso de los biocombustibles, donde en Colombia ya tenemos un avance importante con nuestra reglamentación del 12% de mezcla y donde nos constituimos como uno de los países con la mezcla más alta a nivel mundial. Nosotros desde el Ministerio de Minas consideramos que este estudio es de fundamental importancia en todo el camino de la diversificación de nuestra matriz energética, de tener una matriz mucho más limpia y por supuesto con las metas de carbono neutralidad que nos hemos puesto a 2050 como país. Seguimos interesados en buscar más y más métodos de financiación, de movilizar las inversiones hacia el sector de energías limpias y creemos que este estudio, por supuesto, constituye una buena hoja de ruta y tiene unas muy buenas recomendaciones en línea con estos objetivos.
Please let me thank again Deputy Ambassador Gloria Alonso and our Environment Director Rodolfo Lacey for opening this with our video from the Vice Minister of Energy. We are very pleased to be with all of you here today and we'll pass now to a presentation. If Dominic, you could please load this to launch the reports, as we mentioned, on enabling conditions for bioenergy finance and investments in Colombia. Thank you. Next slide, please. So as noted in our opening remarks, Colombia has a large opportunity to tap into its abundant renewable energy sources. As a starting point and to speak to our collaboration with the government of Colombia and in particular the Ministry of Mines and Energy, MME, for this report, alongside with others that were mentioned by Mr. Lacey, such as IPCEI and the National Planning Department, that this report and our CEFIM program are really looking at ways to create the policy framework and the market conditions that can enable the flows of capital to clean energy projects. Our Clean Energy Finance and Investment Mobilization Program, CEFIM, is working with a number of countries to look at these conditions and the opportunities to accelerate finance and investment in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and industry decarbonization. This is what we call clean energy. And as mentioned, in particular, looking at the ways that the domestic enabling conditions, whether they be policy or market supports and tools, or even financial support or investment vehicles that can make those opportunities a reality. And through this, we carry out in our CEFIM program a number of activities with our partner countries, which you see here on the right, including reports such as these, alongside our two core activities that include a clean energy finance and investment roadmap or review, as well as opportunities such as regional peer learning events and dialogues with investors to assess the barriers and challenges in the market to clean energy finance and investment, as well as the opportunities to take action to improve the situation and the overall attractiveness for the development of those projects. And in that, please, next slide. In that, we have kicked off since 2019 our collaboration with Colombia and are very pleased to launch our report on enabling conditions for bioenergy finance and investments in the country. Given the particularly important role that these opportunities play in the opportunities to meet, as was mentioned by our opening remarks, Colombia's ambitions, as well as opportunities and large potential for clean energy development. With that, please let me hand over to my colleague, Laila Davies, who will be speaking about the pieces of this report and the opportunities for this in Colombia.
Thank you. Thank you, John. I'd like to start off by congratulating Colombia on having taken a leading role in climate action in Latin America and the Caribbean, and in particular for having set the ambitious targets of substantially reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 51% in 2030. The government's commitment to delivering on these targets can be seen clearly in measures such as the Green Growth Policy, the recent Energy Transition Law, and also the Climate Action Law last year. This is also highlighted by progress in recent years on renewable auctions, which has allowed Colombia to tap into its abundant renewable potential and have significantly increased solar and wind additions. As Colombia works towards achieving its sustainable development ambitions, one area of opportunity in particular stands out. Our CEFIM report is based on the potential which has been identified for bioenergy to play a strategic role in meeting Colombia's climate and energy policy objectives, tapping into widely available residues and waste, for instance, from agricultural and municipal activities. These solutions can help improve the reliability and the affordability of Colombia's energy supply, whilst also reducing dependency on energy imports. Bioenergy can equally support the achievement of other policy objectives, such as reducing the amount of waste going to Colombia's aging landfills and increasing overall productivity of certain industries. Our CEFIM report on enabling conditions for bioenergy finance and investment is really looking at measures that the government of Colombia can take, working with domestic, regional, and international partners to open the door to these solutions. These actions build upon current efforts in Colombia, as well as drawing on insights from other country experiences to help attract the private investment needed to scale up bioenergy development and help drive Colombia's clean energy transition. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. As mentioned earlier, Colombia has substantial potential to generate clean energy from available bioenergy sources, such as bagasse or, sugarcane bagasse or rice straw, but bioenergy can also be produced from livestock manure or certain industrial wastes, such as organic residues from the dairy industry. It can also be produced from municipal waste, which is already being done in the Doña Juana biogas facility in Bogota, which captures landfill emissions for producing energy. Estimates of the technical potential for biogas production from organic waste amount to roughly 14 terawatt hours. The type of organic waste we're talking about are those that you can see here on this graph. To put that into context, 14 terawatt hours is roughly 20% of Colombia's current electricity supply. This is also more than double the average annual output of San Carlos, which is Colombia's largest hydroelectric power plant. The advantage of these types of organic residues is that they also are often located close to local demand centers, which means they can provide a local low carbon supply of energy, either for electricity production or as an alternative to fossil fuels. This means that they can not only help address a growing reliance on fossil fuels, but they can also help meet other policy objectives, such as reducing emissions from waste, which account for roughly 6% of Colombia's greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. Of course, policy plays a key role in enabling the implementation of clean energy solutions, such as bioenergy. This is clear looking at the existing bioenergy installations in Colombia in sugar and palm industries. Those industries already use combined heat and power generation with agricultural residues for on-site energy needs, as well as selling surplus electricity to the grid. As you can see here, sale of surplus electricity to the grid from the sugar and palm industries remained relatively constant throughout the 2000s. It was only in 2008 when successive policy reforms were put in place that new capacity additions came about. These reforms include Law 1215 and Craig Resolution 5 of 2010, which opened the door to bilateral contracts for cogeneration plants to sell their surplus electricity, but also provided a number of financial incentives and clarified the technical requirements for cogeneration. Of course, the Renewable Energy Law of 2014 and subsequent regulations such as Resolution 45 were also very important measures which provided new fiscal incentives and also eased the access to the grid for cogeneration plants. As a result of this, the sale of surplus electricity to the grid increased sevenfold and represented roughly 1% of Colombia's total electricity supply in 2021. This cogeneration also supplied about 1 terawatt hour of energy to industry for self-consumption. This is roughly equivalent to 120,000 tons of coal, highlighting the potential of this type of clean energy to replace fossil fuels. This shows the importance of regulatory reforms and the use of market incentives to really drive the attractiveness of these solutions. Next slide, please. Still, outside of these applications in the sugar and palm industries, other bioenergy opportunities, such as energy recovery from organic municipal waste or cogeneration in other industries, remain relatively limited in the Colombian context. Part of this is due to a lack of clear signaling of those opportunities. At high level, energy recovery from waste is highlighted in a number of policies, such as the circular economy policy, the green growth policy, and the National Energy Plan to 2050. But at a more pragmatic level, the how, where, and when of these projects are not really spelled out. For instance, in Colombia's referenced electricity generation expansion plan, which looks at expansion over the next decade. In fact, as you can see here on this graph, for 2034, bioenergy is only set to represent about 2% of non-conventional renewable energy in Colombia. This could indicate to developers and investors that bioenergy is not really a priority area. However, digging a bit deeper into how these outlooks are developed, this is largely due to how expansion plans are built, notably based off of the existing pipeline of projects, rather than considering the technical feasibility or the socioeconomic benefits of certain projects like biomethane electricity production. This is different than what is often done in certain countries where electricity generation plans might incorporate policy targets. These often reflect techno-economic models that consider how to meet power system needs in the most efficient or acceptable manner. Colombia could, for example, do likewise by highlighting the potential of bioenergy in these generation expansion plans. Next slide. Thank you. However, alongside signaling the opportunities for bioenergy in policymaking, it's equally important to focus measures on strengthening the pipeline of projects that inform plans such as the expansion plan. Generally speaking, implementation of clean energy projects can be relatively complex and face a number of challenges, but this is particularly true for bioenergy due to its multifaceted nature and also the large number of actors it calls upon. In practice, as you can see here, quite a few ministries directly influence the policy frameworks for bioenergy project development. For example, various ministries will be responsible for waste treatment depending on the origin of the waste. Others will be responsible for the environmental licensing of projects, and others still on matters relating to energy production or connection to the grid. At local level, there is an additional layer of coordination from local government, which touches on areas such as planning, enforcement, and monitoring. This creates a rather complex environment which affects the whole chain of activities from waste treatment, sorting to bioenergy project development. Improving the cooperation and coordination across these different authorities can help strengthen the pipeline for bioenergy projects. For instance, a coordination board or a bioenergy project committee can ensure that policy objectives and the regulatory frameworks are well aligned and easy to navigate. In fact, in a number of countries, facilities such as one-stop shops or a single window are used to provide a single point of entry for investors and developers. This can help reduce their overall risk and the costs associated with project preparation. And it's something that Colombia may want to consider in order to facilitate bioenergy project development. Next slide. Of course, it goes without saying that price signals and cost incentives are also a strong motivation for clean energy projects. And in case of bioenergy, there are a number of areas where this could be strengthened in Colombia. For example, current connection rules and access procedures can be relatively complex and difficult to navigate, particularly for small players that may not have the technical capacity or the experience to navigate a multi-year approval process. Simplifying grid connections and also lowering access fees can therefore support bioenergy development, for example, in the agricultural sector, where there are abundant residues, but as mentioned, not necessarily the energy-related capacity. In terms of waste disposal, Colombia has one of the strongest regulatory frameworks on waste management in Latin America, and as a result, collection rates are very high. This is therefore a good opportunity to take advantage of this framework to set signals to divert waste away from landfills and align incentives to encourage actors to seek new alternatives to treat, sort, and recover waste, for instance, for energy recovery. Industry players can also play a pivotal role in developing some of these early solutions. In fact, this will also help them manage fluctuations from fluctuations in the price of fossil fuels. This has in fact been one of the key drivers for early waste to energy projects, for example, in the cement industry. However, these investments can often be costly and hard to justify when the price of fossil fuels is low. Setting signals such as carbon pricing or tools such as emission trading schemes can help provide a long-term vision for industry to start investing and developing these types of bioenergy opportunities. Lastly, retailers and energy utilities can also have a very important role in driving demand for bioenergy solutions. But at the moment, there's very little incentive for them to look for these types of projects. Notably, the renewable energy portfolio standards, which were established in 2019 and are a very good step, do not at this point include distributed renewable energy, which means that retailers will not necessarily look for these types of projects to include in their renewable portfolios. So over these last slides, and indeed in the report, we try to highlight a number of these challenges which bioenergy is facing at the moment due to its multifaceted nature, but also due to the fact that it is an early market. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, John Dulac now, to talk about some of the opportunities we've also highlighted to help scale up bioenergy development.
Thank you, Laila. Next slide, please. As it was mentioned in the opening remarks, as well as the context setting around bioenergy in Colombia to date, with large opportunities moving forward, I think it's very important to highlight that Colombia has one of the most impressive frameworks around clean energy and environmental and waste policy in Latin America and the Caribbean. And a number of the recommendations that you see before you here are ways that this existing framework can be tweaked in different ways to create the conditions that encourage the overall appetite and opportunities for developers and investors to step into the bioenergy market, particularly beyond the applications, as Laila mentioned, that have been developed over the last decade or so in the palm oil and the sugarcane industries. And as Laila mentions, one of the particular pieces here that really is, as I mentioned, just a tweak to the existing policy is looking at the ways that the current targets, which all do highlight, at least at a high level, the opportunities for bioenergy solutions, to put this into practical terms for developers. And this may mean spelling out in terms of either subsectoral breakdowns or regional plans, or even, as mentioned by Laila, the overall electricity generation expansion plans for the country to 2030 and beyond, so that it's clear to developers that there is firstly interest in those opportunities and their development on behalf of the government and related stakeholders. But that equally that it is worth their initiative to put the time and resources into developing the proposals for those solutions, which of course can be intensive depending on the site and location and technology type. It also then looks at what is facilitating the process. So when that appetite is there, how can policy be coordinated in a way that facilitates the pipeline of those projects? And as mentioned by Laila, there are a number of actors in this space, given the complexity of bioenergy and waste energy technologies. And some of this may be, particularly for new entrants to the market, relatively complex policy framework to navigate. It may, as Laila noted, require a number of different documents that need to be prepared and accepted by government authorities. It may also mean understanding upstream where waste flows will come from, the different actors that are involved in this, and how to coordinate these in a way that, of course, reduce the overall cost of project development and operations. And there are a number of ways that this could be treated, in particularly looking at the opportunities to provide information in a very clear and transparent way to potential developers, possibly, as noted by Laila, to use things like a one-stop shop or a single window facility, so that those who have questions around the policy framework or the different documents that they need to fulfill, that they have easy access to this information and that it's very transparent what is required on their behalf to put those projects forward and into the pipeline of, for example, new electricity developments. Once those projects are in the pipeline, for instance, in terms of the expansion plans, more can be done to not only coordinate those actors, but equally to streamline the overall connection processes. We did note throughout this report that there were a number of areas where these procedures could be streamlined, and that equally may be of interest, particularly for early market development for some of these distributed renewable sources, like, for example, bioenergy generation in local farms. That these actors, particularly given smaller sizes, may see upfront costs for things like grid connections as a possible barrier. And therefore, as part of the look into the streamlining of these procedures, it may also be interesting to look at lowering or even removing some of those connection fees for early projects to create an early pipeline of bioenergy projects and demonstrate to the market the opportunities for these types of solutions. This pairs, of course, then to looking at different opportunities to provide incentives to bioenergy project developers and investors. And in some of these, of course, economic measures can play a clear role in influencing the market. These can be, particularly for larger actors, as mentioned by Lila, signals such as the carbon pricing scheme or the emissions trading scheme that are under development currently, in a way that encourages industry or utilities to seek out alternative solutions like bioenergy projects. It also can be, as noted, upstream. Colombia has a very impressive track record in terms of the accomplishments it's had around waste management in the country, where over 90% of waste today is collected. But on the flip side, that waste is generally speaking sent to landfills. And part of this is due to the fact that landfill fees are relatively low. As Colombia looks to address things like the age of its landfills, as well as to fulfill some of the ambitions within policies like the circular economy strategy or the bioeconomy strategy, that these are opportunities to look at landfill fees and the economic incentives they provide for the development of solutions like municipal waste to energy opportunities, such as the Bogota biogas plant, and how these may eventually be ratcheted up over time to provide that incentive to find alternatives for the sorting, recycling, and treatment of waste, and the eventual use for things like bioenergy and waste to energy solutions. Lastly, there is equally opportunity to drive some of the demand in the market, which will signal to eventual project developers, particularly those that may be on a more distributed or smaller level, for instance, in terms of local bioenergy applications, that these can be fulfilled through off-taker agreements, for example, using things like Colombia's existing, renewable generation requirements for utilities, that these could be expanded to include quotas for distributed renewable projects, not only in the case of bioenergy, but equally for other renewable energy opportunities in Colombia, where currently, as noted by Lila, there isn't much incentive to pursue these, particularly given the success of the renewable energy auctions in which relatively large-scale projects were auctioned to the utilities. And so, of course, in terms of transaction fees and overall capacity to access those quotas through a very simplified procedure using the auctions, that is not necessarily the case today that utilities have appetite to seek out some of these smaller projects. And so by spelling this out in the current quotas for utilities could drive some of the demand for those bioenergy solutions. Equally, there are some opportunities through things like renewable portfolio standards, as well as through other opportunities like, the use of the unregulated consumers today that could pursue bioenergy solutions through, for example, power purchase agreements. That all of these are essentially low-hanging fruits in terms of slight reforms in the current policy framework that would generate some demand for distributed renewable energy solutions like bioenergy technologies that would help to signal to the market that there is in fact interest in developing those, and importantly, that there is an off-taker for those projects in order to justify the upfront capital cost through, for example, power purchase agreements over a longer-term contract. Next slide, please. All of this points to, of course, the financing and investment side of the equation, that once these projects are signaled in terms of opportunity and appetite and demand for their development, that those procedures are streamlined and facilitated as much as possible. There is, of course, the question of where the funds will come from to finance those projects. We have seen already in Colombia, particularly with these examples in the sugarcane and palm industries, that larger industry players are currently financing some of this on balance sheets using their own finances, but that this process could be facilitated by access to more affordable finance using, for example, commercial finance with domestic banks. For smaller players, for example, local dairy farms that could be eventually producing things like biogas for sale to electricity generators or to local industries, for example, that their credit profiles and the overall awareness of banks to lend to these types of projects may be barriers to those projects moving forward. And so there are, of course, a number of ways that this market can be facilitated through different injections of support and financial instruments that can encourage the development of those projects in a way that the access to finance and the affordability of finance are practical for project developers. And in terms of some of these opportunities, we have looked, as you see before you here, at a number of ways that the government could support, particularly early development of these projects in a way that would help to increase the overall awareness and appetite for financing those projects, as well as to open the doors through demonstration in the market for capital markets to finance these projects on a rolling basis. And that through this, firstly, and importantly, of course, public funds play a very significant role in early project development. That as part of these public funds, Colombia does in fact have a number of national funds in place today that are designed to support the development of clean energy projects and could be targeted in a way that supports the development of bioenergy projects. Mostly today, these public funds are used in the form of grants, and this, of course, could be applied to bioenergy projects, but it also could be done in a way that is more targeted, applying financial schemes such as de-risking mitigants or, for example, partial risk guarantees, to use those funds in a way that leverages private capital and that equally opens the door to commercial finance in a way that, again, de-risks those projects. There also is the opportunity to make available some of the existing guarantees that are in the Colombian market today through facilities, for example, like FINOGE, that this could be a way to diminish risk for possible investors and developers in the market. And this, of course, will help to encourage the first pipeline of those projects in the market in a way that demonstrates to the financial markets in Colombia and elsewhere that these are viable projects in the market and that they have a certain return to investment profile that is attractive for investors, and that the support is there in terms of these targeted financial schemes so that their concerns and the eventual barriers to finance are addressed in an effective way using those public funds intelligently. As part of such, and in particular in working with international partners, there's also some need to build up, as mentioned, the overall awareness and capacity to process those projects and to create that pipeline. Some of this is on the technical capacity that is looking, for instance, in working with the stakeholders who actually will develop those projects. So this is obviously at a much more local level, working, for instance, with local agricultural industry to make sure that they understand how these projects are designed and operated. Some of it is also providing technical capacity building with financial institutions to make sure that they are aware of those projects on the investment return profiles, as well as with the overall documentation behind them. And that use of different support mechanisms, including work with international partners, as was done in some of the case studies that we noted in the report, and we'll have some examples in our panel discussion shortly. That this is a real way to open the door for finance of those projects by ensuring that the capacities in the market are there to work with those types of projects and to make sure that they have access to the appropriate financing. On the financing side, as noted, there equally can be ways to drive some early market development, particularly with domestic financial institutions using tools like concessional credit lines and on lending to encourage them to lend to those early projects while equally building their familiarity with them. Some of this could be done, for instance, and pairing back to this point on technical capacity through things like blended finance, where elements of technical capacity building, for example, working with international partners, that is paired to things like concessional credit lines, can be done to create an enabling condition that not only allows access to the affordable finance, but make sure that the overall awareness and capacity to treat those projects is in fact increasing over time, and that financial institutions are becoming more aware of those opportunities. And all of this to say is then to look at how those targeted solutions and appropriate financial support mechanisms can create a pipeline. And the importance of this pipeline is firstly to make sure that these projects are not one-offs, that as that capacity is built, as the awareness is there, as commercial finance becomes available to those projects, that this is something that maintains itself. And what we have been seeing in terms of discussions with partners in this space and looking at the current projects in the market is that there are a number of actors who in fact could help to support this. And one such example, which we'll be speaking in our panel discussion today, is Colombia, that in fact already has a sustainable credit line that is helping borrowers to identify the appropriate technologies and the relevant equipment suppliers for those solutions. Building upon this type of support, in fact, can ensure that those projects continue to enter into the market and that this type of pipeline is created, pairing, of course, with some of the signals on the policy side that I mentioned before, like the renewable portfolio standards. And then lastly, of course, as these projects do feed into a pipeline, access to overall capital markets will become important, ensuring that the scalability of that finance and the overall investments for a bioenergy economy in Colombia is in place. And there are, of course, opportunities to address this, which can equally help to address the overall cost of finance for bioenergy projects, as has been seen in some of the first instances, for example, of green bond issuance in Colombia, making the overall conditions and the financing for clean energy projects more attractive and more affordable. As part of such, this is again somewhere where Colombia can build upon the impressive efforts that have been made to date, building upon, for example, the country's sustainable finance framework and ongoing taxonomy work to really signal to investors that bioenergy opportunities are part of the solutions moving forward in line with the country's clean energy ambitions and overall sustainable development ambitions, so that these types of projects have access to those capital markets and that in a way that allows them to scale up to the types of additions that we have seen in recent years, for example, with the solar and wind additions. Next slide, please. As I noted, this is an opportune time to note that the report is live on our website in both Spanish and English. We would encourage you to download this report to read in more detail a number of the elements that we have discussed in today's presentation. And this includes the 5 case studies that are in the report looking at good practices and lessons learned from bioenergy projects in other countries, as well as in Colombia itself, as you can see here in the middle with Manuelita in terms of their experience in the sugarcane industry of developing these bioenergy cogeneration solutions. Across these examples, pulling from Brazil, Chile, Colombia, India, and Turkey, we have seen a number of common points that you will hear from a few of the case studies, as well as other participants in the panel today, of what has really worked in terms of these enabling conditions, whether they be policy signals or financial support or other market measures that have really made those projects possible. And so with that, I would like firstly to again thank the Ministry of Mines and Energy, as well as our colleagues across the government of Colombia for their cooperation in this report. We are very pleased to launch it with you here today. We hope that the lessons from these case studies, as well as from the number of international practices that are mentioned in the report, are useful in the development of a bioenergy economy in Colombia. And lastly, before handing over the floor to our moderator for the panel discussion, I'm sorry?
To Juliano Rojas from MME, who's going to give a...
Yeah, oh, so I'm sorry, yes. And to handing over to MME before the panel discussion for some follow-on remarks. I would like to thank our colleagues at the government of Denmark who have very generously supported this FM program and our work with Colombia. And so with that, please let me hand over to Julio. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing your name, Rojas, from the Ministry of Mines and Energy, to give some remarks from MME's side on the opportunities for bioenergy development. Julio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, John. And thank you for the presentation. I'm going to switch to Spanish. We're going to show you a presentation we have prepared. So now I think you can see my screen. Bueno. Buenos días para todos desde Colombia.
Good morning to each and every one of you from Colombia. Special greetings to those who have joined this launching event of the OECD report on enabling conditions for bioenergy finance and investment in Colombia. Special greetings to our ambassador of the permanent mission before OECD, Gloria, and also for our friends from CEFIN. We would like to start by thanking you for the interest and support that OECD had in the development of this study, that without any doubt, it is a very important contribution at the technical level in order to move forward energy transition of Colombia. This energy transition, which is the legacy that we want to leave for the present and the future of Colombia. And we have based it on these 3 pillars that you have on the screen. These 3 pillars are related to what we want for our system, for our country: reliability, coverage, efficiency, and sustainability. All this passing through the massification of renewable energy, unconventional ones, bridging the energy gaps, and to have the energy sector as a leader, as a benchmark in the fight against climate change. Within this framework, and to provide you with a context to all those participating in this, in August 2018, Colombia was counting on 2 projects, 2 installed projects, a wind project, which was a test, and also a solar project, and it amounted for 28 megawatts. And thanks to a modern regulatory framework and innovative public policy, today the Colombian energy transition is a reality, and we have increased 25 times the country's installed capacity for the generation of solar and wind energy. And very recently, we had the launching of our first wind park after 17 years. It's called Guajira 1. And each week we have seen the inauguration of different self-generation projects at large scale. And we have a commitment for more than 2,800 projects that are going to be part of our energy mix. And they have been awarded through auctions that we have organized at the Ministry of Mines and Energy. On the slide, you can see how these projects have been distributed throughout the Colombian map, and highlighting the wind part that is focused on the Department of La Guajira in the northern part of our country. Here we would like to show that this is a path that we have followed for many years, and it has counted on the coordination and organization of the different branches of public power in Colombia, starting with our regulation on utilities and our electricity law, the liberalization of the market, and one that has to do with the reasonable use of energy in 2001. We then were talking about unconventional renewable energy, now the one of 2014, which is the one that deals with incentives. It creates funds for the incentive to this type of energy source and also energy efficiency. And then we had the development that we experience in the executive sector through decrees, which have crystallized auctions, energy efficiency plans, reaching the last 4 years, where we had in the National Development Plan new goals, amendments to the incentives of the previous law, and the recent progress of Law 2099 of 2021 on energy transition, which touches on new elements of energy transition, as is the case of the use, capture, and storage of carbon, and also the definition of blue, green hydrogen, the leverage of new investments in smart measuring, all these key topics for energy transition. Many of these incentives were materialized in laws of this country, reaching that transition or moving forward in that transition, that it will be the main sectoral public policy for these 4 years. Thanks to this regulatory and tax incentives and innovative public policy, we see that the manifestations of these renewable energies is already a reality. As I mentioned, in the National Development Plan, we have included different incentives and specific measures in order to promote unconventional renewable energy and energy efficiency. We have some examples on this slide. For example, we went from 5 to 15 years regarding tax exemption or tax reduction, which was part of Law 1715 of 2014. Moreover, we facilitated the procedures, the processes, so we deleted some that were unnecessary. And we have counted on a facility for the development of these projects, wind and solar projects that are going to be installed in the country, and not to think about an environmental diagnosis on alternatives. We also have something that is mandatory in order for 10% of the energy sold to end users in our country should come from unconventional renewable sources, and that is a commitment for energy traders that serve our users in our country. And by means of another law, the growth law or financing law, we have set forth incentives for capital intensive companies, as is the case of the energy sector. And the Congress approved a gradual reduction on income tax, which was in 33%, and it has been reduced, given some advantages to this type of industry. At last, as of 2022, it's a 100% discount to value-added tax, and this was extended to another tax, which is the industry and trade tax. All this fiscal and regulatory framework, what it aimed at is to materialize our incentives to incorporate unconventional renewable energy. We had two important auctions, one in October 2019, where we awarded more than 1,365 megawatts between wind and solar energy. And October last year, in a recent auction, we awarded 11 projects, all of them solar projects, to 9 companies, which are going to be part of our electricity energy mix in future years. We're very pleased with that, because that's new competition in the sectors, new companies that are interested in the country, and this is going to result in efficiencies to our end users. At last, we have the last instrument, which is Law 1929, which brought in the objective of Law 1715 that we had since 2014. And this law is betting on bridging gaps, equality, sustainable movement for the production of unconventional renewable energy in Colombia. And it offers incentives such as the extension of these tax benefits, for example, the exclusion of value-added tax, tariffs, and also an accelerated depreciation in 3 years instead of 5 years, and passing through certain initiatives such as incentives for the installation of smart meters, because we believe that that is the first step in energy transition, to empower the user, to give more information to the user in order for him or her to make informed decisions that will result in benefits in the energy mix and in energy consumption. Blue and green hydrogen, these are new concepts that we see for the first time in the law of Colombia, and they are now part of the regulation through decrees and resolutions. Actually, last Friday, we have the inauguration of the first 2 green hydrogen pilots in the country. One is it belongs to Ecopetrol, our state company, and the other one is of Promigas, And this is the first time that green hydrogen is injected in our gas distribution system, and it's a blending test that is going to result in important lessons. Moreover, we are focusing all our hedge funds. It's one that we're going to call Fund Energía, and this money is going to be used in reaching out the universalization of these services. That's one of our important targets. We cannot accept that in Colombia, we still have people without access to electricity. In addition to this, we provided guidelines to focus the subsidies in those who need it the most. This was part of the Energy Transition Mission under item 4, where we had important contributions and guidelines on how this concentration should take place. In the case of bioenergy, how are we doing within the transition framework? It's always important to review new sources of energy. So this study by OECD is of paramount importance within the framework of climate policies and energy policies also. This sector, through the Ministry of Mines and Energy and related agencies, and also with the Ministry of the Environment and other institutions, we have been developing the use of biogas based on residual biomass, considering the potential that this technology will contribute to the country's sustainable development. In 2021, we achieved international support for the pilot application of a methodology that takes into account the experiences of biogas developers and of other actors. This is to identify the most important barriers in terms of biogas investment and policy measures that should be the proper ones to face that. The country counts on policies and energy and environmental regulations, which provide this framework for the development of bioenergy. But since it is all scattered, things are more difficult to be understood by project developers. Specifically, the country has a sound commitment with sustainable development, with sustainable development goals regarding clean energy, and this is seen in the signing of international agreements that go together with public policies. We would like to highlight that within the Ministry of Mines and Energy, we have set targets and actions related to climate change and development of renewable energies. Nevertheless, unlike other renewable energies, which we have already seen developed in the country, such as solar and wind energy, well, we have that geothermal energy, and the use of energy requires the action of different areas of public policy, in addition to the energy sector, as we have seen in the presentations that were shared with us. We have many challenges ahead of us. Many were tackled by our colleagues in the previous presentation. Even though in our country we do have credit lines, non-reimbursable funds, and financial instruments that could support a larger number of developers. But there is lack of knowledge on the existence and characteristic of these, but there is also a lack of skills and necessary tools in order to formulate projects that could be financed, mainly projects of small producers. That's why the financing related topic that has been mentioned as a barrier finds in this study a key opportunity to strengthen the skills of developers as well as of banking institutions in order to finance more projects. Even this, we consider it is necessary to adopt measures in order to create an awareness on the possibility of using residual biomass in agricultural sectors with high potential, disseminating its benefits through the system of circular economy, green businesses, or bioeconomy. At last, to wrap up, As suggested by the result of this study, reforms on policies and market signals have played a very important role in order to enable the development of clean energy in Colombia, including the recent developments of wind and solar energy that we saw in the auctions. And in order to tap in these possibilities in bioenergy, we have to count on this progress in order to implement regulatory measures and market measures that will enable financing and investment in these solutions. We're going to continue working as a government with our entities, with all of our stakeholders in order to set clear targets and to improve the coordination among relevant authorities to strengthen orientation, training, regulation, on, for example, on waste, so they can have access to the grid. And also, we would like to continue working with our key partners, such as OECD, in order to improve this knowledge and access to bioenergy technologies, and also to develop specific financial schemes that will promote an accessible financing for future projects. This is what we wanted to share with you on the site of the Ministry of Mines and Energy. Thanks for this opportunity. Thanks, OECD, for your CEFIM project in the coaching of this energy transition project in Colombia.
Okay, muchas gracias, Julian, and thanks very much for these remarks. It's great to hear the progress being made in this front, and we hope that the report is useful as you continue forward. Of course, the CEFIM program and the OECD are very pleased to be working with MME, and we hope to continue this fruitful collaboration together. As we are running a bit over time, let me please introduce our panel session and our moderator to learn a bit more, as mentioned, from some of the case studies in the report, as well as others working actively in this bioenergy space in Colombia, to get a sense of what is possible, as well as types of lessons learned and good practices that can be applied in the Colombian context. To introduce today's panels, looking at the actions and opportunities for bioenergy project development, we are kindly joined by Ms. Carolina Agudelo, excuse me, Arbelayes, from PwC and the Climate Finance Accelerator, who will be moderating the session today. We're equally pleased, but I will let Carolina introduce our panelists for today's discussion. Just as a quick housekeeping note for those as we come into the panel and the question and answers session, to please raise your hand or to send your questions via the chat so that we can distribute them with Carolina once the panel discussions have concluded. With that, Carolina, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, John, and thank you everybody for being here. As John mentioned, my name is Carolina Agudelo, and then I will moderate this panel. And it is really a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And it's really nice to be talking with our panelists about bioenergy sector, their experiences, and it will be nice to learn from them what they have done and how can we improve and use those lessons learned here in Colombia to speed up the process to get financial closure for our projects. Then I would like to introduce first to our panelists. Today we are with Daniel Matos, Head of Co-Processing, Asociación Brasileira de Cemento Portland from Brazil Cement Industry. We also are with Ignacio Suarez, Head of Energy, Manuelita Azúcar y Energía, Colombia Agroindustry. Diego Fernandez, Climate Change and Sustainability Consultant at Implementasur, working on the Recycle Orgánicos Program. Jose Maria Rincón Martinez, founder of the Industrial Development Research Group in Colombia. Hans van Tol, Chief Executive Officer at the Dutch Power Group, a technology provider and project developer from the Netherlands. And finally, with Catalina Cano Zapata, Vice President of Innovation and Sustainability at Bancolombia. Then welcome you all. And then again, thanks for being here. Then we will start kind of the panel discussions. We'll start with an overview about the 3 case studies that actually John mentioned previously. And then I will follow up with some questions across the panel regarding actions and opportunity for the bioenergy project development in Colombia. Then our first question goes for Danielle regarding alternative fuel use in the cement industry. Then it is well known that use of alternative fuels has been growing in Brazil since the 1990s, contributing to one of the lowest cement sector CO2 intensities in the world. Then, Danielle, we would like to understand 3 things. Where does the sector stand today on co-processing with alternative fuels? Also, it would be very nice if you can speak briefly about which factors that support that alternative fuel use, for example, waste regulation and industry initiative, and also what challenges has there been in developing a supply chains for refuse-derived fuels in the cement industry in Brazil. Then, Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Carolina. It's my pleasure. Good morning for all. I'd like to greet the authorities present at this event, and a special thank to the OECD for the invitation. It's an honor to be able to share with Colombia what we have been doing in Brazil. So as you mentioned before, so it's important to mention that the cement production is one of the most energy intensive industries in the world. The energy expense can account for as much as 50% of cement companies' operating costs. In Brazil, the cement industry has one of the lowest CO2 intensities in the world, thanks to a number of actions, including the use of alternative fuels and mailing by clinker substitution when it's ground with slag, pozzolan, or fly ash. Just so you know, today we are at 564 kilograms of CO2 per ton of cement versus the global average of 633 kilograms. That it's good, good result for us after those initiatives. So about where we are today, let me say that in Brazil, we have been using alternative fuels since 1990s, and in our country, a wide variety of alternative fuels are used for co-processing, like biomass. In biomass, I can quote for you. For instance, we are using acai seeds and the rice husks, for example, municipal waste, tires, and even hazardous waste that it's produced by petrochemical, especially by petrochemical companies. By the initiative of our sector, a cement technology roadmap was launched in 2019 with the International Energy Agency and also IFC. We set targets to achieve 35% thermal substitution in cement production by 2030 and 55 by 2050. It's important to highlight that in 2020, we are at 28% of substitution level. It means that we anticipated almost 5 years what we had predicted. And the use of municipal solid waste under the roadmap is critical to meet the target, since we expect to have 10% of fuel input by 2030. It means a huge quantity of waste, around 2.5 million tons a year, and investment in total. It means in the pre-treatment facility and also in the cement plants, around $600 million for the next 10 years. Municipal solid waste in Brazil is not only an environmental challenge, but also often a waste management problem. Around 8 million tons of municipal solid waste are generated annually, and 41% is not sent to appropriate sanitary waste sites. Thus, while urban waste is an RDF opportunity, for cement production, the cost can still be an issue, since as it's cheaper or free to landfill. And there can be little incentive to handle municipal solid waste for alternative uses. But despite the difficulties, in 2019, 2 pretreatment facilities were implemented in Brazil, which provide the RDF to cement plants, and moreover, contributed to the closure of more than 20 illegal dumps. About the main aspects of the regulatory aspects, we have been working closely with the government, creating the necessary conditions to boost new projects. In Brazil, the first resolution, which defines the rules for co-processing, was published in 1999, and it ran for more than 2 decades. And we worked throughout 2020, it means two years ago, with the government to review and modernize it, bring the most current concepts of European regulations, such as new emission limits and greater clarity on the licensing process, materials, and substances that can be co-processed. A successful case that I can share with you, is that it was applied in Brazil, was the national regulation that prevented tires from going to landfills. And the National Tire Industry Association accordingly worked to establish services for collection and final disposal of scrap tires. This led to the creation of more than 1,500 collection points across the country, which supported the development of waste and energy recovery. Nowadays, around 60 million of tires are sent to the cement plants for co-processing. It means that almost 50% of the old tires produced and disposed in Brazil are going to co-processing, sorry. We have also a national waste policy, which was launched in 2010, and the main objective was to end irregular landfills dumping until 2014, but unfortunately it failed. While implementation of the national waste policy encountered a number of challenges, the federal government worked to improve the situation and passed a new basic sanitation framework. And now it is mandatory that the municipalities begin charging a tax or fee for waste management services. It also requires states to define their municipal waste management programs, taking into account the legal waste hierarchy, which brings legal certainty and financial resources to the waste chain. Based on that, a good example is the unprecedented auction of electrical energy that took place last year, and the first WTE waste-to-energy plant is being built in São Paulo, and it will provide around 15 megawatts a year. Another outstanding rule of the federal waste policy was published in January of this year, and it no longer allows hazardous waste with high calorific value be disposed of in landfills, and when there are properly licensed energy recovery facilities at a distance of up to 1,500 kilometers. Another pretty good initiative was the setup of an association called Frente de Recuperação de Energia, where we are partnering with two of the biggest waste associations in the country. This association has a cooperation agreement with the Ministry of the Environment, and we all work together and try to concentrate common topics and make efforts to create better conditions to move forward. So moving on to my closing remarks of the speech, I believe that the success of using alternative fuels in industry depends on several important factors. This includes a well-defined regulatory framework for the use of RDF, as well as an effective and reliable management process to ensure an economically viable supply of waste to encourage long-term investments. The challenge that we have ahead after the structuring reforms promoted by the federal government clearly is to execute the projects at the regional level, states and municipalities. And indeed, we consider an open and continuous dialogue with the government is the key to neutral carbon economy with renewable sources and less disposal in landfills and its consequent insertion in the circular economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Very interesting to know how you reach to bring these derived fuels to the cement industry. Then I'm sure that we will learn a lot from these experiences, and of course, to speed up our projects that we already have moving on in Colombia, and perhaps to add another projects. Then thank you a lot. And then next, just to have a sense of the cogeneration industry, existing industry in Colombia, we have, as I mentioned, Ignacio Suarez from Manuelita. Then Ignacio, it is well known that Manuelita has a long history in agribusinesses, right? Then would be nice if you could please tell us about your experience of Manuelita using agricultural residues for cogeneration, and perhaps understand what has influenced or supported sales to the grid, and what potential do you see for expansion capacity, or conversely, what are the challenges for this expansion capacity?
Yeah. Good day for all of you. Thanks for the opportunity to show the experience we have with the use of residues for producing energy. I have just one slide. To show you I don't know if you see already the presentation. Manuelita is an energy self-sufficient sugarcane mill in Valle del Cauca, Colombia. And we, at early stages, we produce energy for our own process, using the residue from the cane that we call biogas as source of energy for the boilers. And due to the conditions on the market, we were able to start selling energy to the grid because there was a season that was very dry and the opportunity arose. And we start only with changes in our process to sell a little amount of energy. Then that was the stage 0 that we call it. Only we do was improve the use of steam in a factory. Then we saw these opportunities and we started our stage 1. And then we are now in this stage and we're selling to the grid 8 megawatts per hour. That means about 54 gigawatts a year. And what we do was efficient use of electricity in our factory. We install efficient electric motors. We reduce steam requirements in some engines that were used steam turbines to change for motors. And we install a new 25 megawatts per hour turbo generator. Also, we use this energy to the nearby use of water for the fields of cane, and that's been good for us. We see that for the future, we can expand this capacity from 54 gigawatts a year to 184 gigawatts a year by making some new improvements in our process, installing a new boiler and a new generator, a 45 megawatts generator, and a boiler of 180 tons per hour. This is, we see that the impulse is the market, and maybe the regulations can help us. And the financing is very important for us because this new project is a higher cost, so we need financing and maybe some other regulations to do it. This is very good for us also because we improve our process and more efficient process, not only to sell to the grid for supplying to the grid, but also to improve our installation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignacio, for this explanation about the steam generation in Manuelita. Then, yeah, we all know that Manuelita has all this experience. Then it is an example for all the industry to follow up and then to make use of the agricultural resources that we have in our country. Then keep in mind in the timing, then I will follow up the next questions with Diego Fernandez, which is from Recyclo Orgánico from Chile. Then Diego, for all of you that you have, if you have read the report, the Recycled Organicos programs is a bilateral cooperation with Environment and Climate Change Canada, working on identifying solutions to accelerate actions that reduce amount of organic waste going to landfill in Chile. Then Diego, could you please tell us about the program and what was the target and also key outcomes and lessons learned that you can share with us today?
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, as you can read in the report, the main topic we want to install over the table was the waste management systems discussion, looking for moving from the current paradigm of waste management to a more sustainable one. Of course, this includes the use of landfill gas recovery systems for the already stored biogas in the landfills, but also including the future diversion or and strengthen the current diversion of organic waste from the disposal sites to composting or anaerobic digestion facilities. So for this, the program addresses 3 work lines. This is public policies, which is targeted mainly to the public sector. Also the technical assistance and capacity building, which is targeted mainly to the public sector, but also to the civil society. And even some actions were targeted to the educational community. And of course, what it's needed to as a driver, it's the generation of projects portfolio and the exploration of business models to achieve the implementation. In general, of course, this has to do with all the related stakeholders within the waste sector, including private sector, public sector, citizenship in general, educational students, let's say, because as soon as you raise awareness in the citizenship, it's better for the future. I will say that the key outcomes in the public policy work line is the national strategy on organic waste. Even it was not planned to do this during the program, The opportunity arose within the Ministry of Environment of Chile, and therefore we supported very actively, helping with technical information, financial analysis, emission analysis, and leading part of the consultation held with the stakeholders alongside the country in 8 regions. This national strategy allows the country to connect, of course, with the national determined contribution, the NDCs. In the capacity building, we financed over 22 projects at different levels. 40 municipalities were supported in applying to state funds, and more than 10, we performed more than 10 detailed engineerings or pre-feasibility studies for different projects at different levels. And finally, at financing projects throughout the 5 years of the implementation of Reciclo Orgánicos, the program delivered capital contributions of around $1 million, which managed to leverage more than $25 million in investment. So those are the key outcomes I can resume here.
Excellent, Diego. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing those key outcomes with us. And then next, we are going to switch for Hans Bohn from the Dutch Power Group from the financial industry sector. We would like to understand, Hans, what has been your experience so far in looking to develop projects in Colombia? Key elements that you look for in particular, for example, clear access to feedstocks, grid access fees, or energy demand outlooks, and perhaps signals or measures you could provide to help enable new projects development in Colombia. Hans, the floor is with you.
Well, thank you, Carolina. Thank you all for having the patience this afternoon to discuss this important report. Thank you for the invitation. We are very happy to be here and be able to share, let's say, some of our experiences so far, not only in Colombia, but we actually act worldwide. Our markets actually develop in Australia, Africa, Southern Europe, and last but not least, Central and South America. So in order to share with you, basically, I'd like to follow up on what Diego just mentioned. Our key approach towards our business in South America would be, first of all, identifying countries with an awareness that is on a level that will actually allow, let's say, business as well as government to direct funding in the direction of the projects that we develop. So that is basically one of the key elements why Colombia, in this case, for us as Dutch Power Group, is a very interesting country, because we think that the awareness is on a level that it is, let's say, able to successfully pinpoint projects in combination with financing opportunities. Furthermore, in creating this awareness, we feel that it is not only a question of implementing products and projects. However, we also see that we have to raise the awareness with regards to, let's say, cooperation between universities and student exchange programs. So that is an important part of the business development that we see in the nowadays, let's say, business. Last but not least, of course, in order to transfer knowledge and to share, let's say, lessons learned. Particularly the last one, I can assure you that we have been working on this waste to energy projects, let's say, in the Netherlands for the last, let's say, 10, 20 years, and there are a lot of lessons learned to share. So that will also, let's say, be able to catapult, let's say, the new countries into this market much faster than we've been doing in the past. One of the key elements you asked for, Carolina, clear access to feedstocks. Well, this is always a thing, an opportunity to investigate, because what we see globally is that there is often a question with regards to the ownership of the feedstock. If you look, for instance, at municipal waste or certain agricultural remains, there is always the feedstock is in many cases the transfer of ownership, let's say legally, is an issue to address. So and also in Colombia, we think that is an opportunity which is already let's say taken care of. So that also triggers us into entering the Colombian market. Furthermore, our concept within Dutch Power Group is basically decentralized and modular, let's say, installations. That coincides greatly with what was just mentioned. Let's say, follow the feedstock. Our installations are basically laid out to follow the feedstock and be able to, let's say, mobilize, demobilize, and mobilize again in different parts of the country. In this case, the asset is basically deployed in the most, let's say, how would I say, effective way. Well, with regards to, let's say, government aid, we see that the regulatory program in Colombia is already, let's say, far. I also refer to what Laila and Davis said, and Mr. Rojas in the beginning. So for us, that is also creating a stable situation where we could actually also still have some influence with the development of the regulatory program, maybe in offering, let's say, lessons learned from the European situation. For instance, to mention tipping fees have been mentioned as particularly low at the moment. Excuse me. Which is basically, if we compare the tipping fees to the situation in the Netherlands, that is a huge difference, and that actually makes many of the projects basically, let's say, non-viable, whereas in the European situation, they are, well, financially viable in a way that installations that we provide actually have a payback period of about 3 to 5 years maximum. So that may be something to, let's say, look into. I'd like to keep it short and maybe open up for questions, etc., etc. I have a lot more to say, but the situation is as such that we actually run out of time. So I'd like to keep it with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans, for your contribution, and then thank you for your participation. We all know that the banking sector is quite key in all these projects. Then it's not just the development, of course, the financial. Then thank you very much. I'm sure then perhaps we can speak later on about projects here in Colombia in the bioenergy sector. Then thank you very much for your contribution. Then now we have José María Rincón from the Centro de Desarrollo Industrial from Colombia. The Industrial Development Research Group, CENDI, looks at developing early market bioenergy projects in the agro-industry sector to help develop Colombia solutions and local expertise. Then we would like to, José María, ask you if you can tell us a bit about your work, why the focus on technology development, and perhaps if you can tell us the key challenges for the bioenergy projects in Colombia and what measures do you believe can unlock their potential. Then, José María, the floor is with you.
Bueno, muchas gracias. ¿Sí me escuchan?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes, yes, we can hear you. I would like to start by telling you how this started. CENDI, I was part of the mission of Wiseman, and the part that I dealt was the part on bioenergy, which is a topic we have been working on for some time now. In this adventure of creating this center, I have also Humberto Rodriguez, who was part of that mission of Wiseman, and he is the leader regarding solar energy, renewable energy in Colombia, and he has worked on all the progress in solar energy. We were both part of this mission, and that's why we have been working together for a long time. And I would like to say that in this mission, we propose the idea of creating research and development centers. And that's why I have decided to create a nonprofit organization that could be used for development projects. And I'm also going to present a development proposal in order to take the country to a higher energy level, and it could be a model to be used throughout Latin America. The source we work with, which is a renewable source, that's the trees. And in trees, the leaves are the solar cells. The leaves take solar radiation. They make or they produce sugar through photosynthesis. It goes to the trunk, creating the wood. That wood could be stored for many years. I mean, 700 years, and it gave rise to coal. So we can store it and use it whenever we need it. So that's the base of our principles. And the other part in which Colombia has advantages for working on bioenergy is that the growth rate for trees is twice, or it is higher than the growth speed of trees to the north and to the south, because we have a constant temperature. Given we are in the tropics, we have a high concentration of sunlight. And if we have solar cells, which are the leaves, because the leaves, what they do is that sunlight becomes chemical energy, which is timber. And that energy could be stored and it could be used whenever needed. With this principle in mind, then the leaves are used to produce biogas, typical biogas, or it could be used for the production of nitrogen or fertilizers. And timber could be used to be stored and to use it whenever needed. So the proposal is for the country, with the help of OECD, to work on development projects in order to have timber production, and it could be transformed into pellets, and those pellets could be used to Europe, or they could be used here as renewable fuel. The difference between fossil fuels and renewable energy is that we are using timber fuel based on trees for 300 million years, and that's why we call them fossil fuels. At this moment, our proposal is to use timber to store it for a maximum period of 50 years, and that is renewable fuel. With the help of OECD, we can set this program. We can produce timber here in 4 or 5 years. We have enough timber for a timber fuel and to transform them into pellets, and then to have renewable fuel and to be able to sell that renewable fuel to the world, taking advantage of the maximum growth of trees in the tropics, and then to transform this into pellets. So we can do this and store it at the commercial level. It's not 1 ton, it's not just a test. So this way we can become traders of renewable fuel. So that is the proposal that we wanted to share with you. The most important thing is to have targets for the future, which could be reachable, as for example, in 2050, zero emissions. And this way we could be exporting renewable energy or renewable fuel in the form of pellets.
You have told us today, and for sure you can share additional information with all the participants and all this pellets technology. Then thank you for your participation and explaining us the technology. Then finally, we are with Catalina Cano. I actually would like to correct. Catalina is leader of international agenda at Colombia, and she's representing the vice president of innovation. Then we would like to understand from Catalina, which is also from the banking sector, if she can tell us a little bit about Colombia's work in supporting solutions like bioenergy technologies amongst your agricultural customers. And perhaps, Catalina, if you can tell us about the main challenges for bioenergy lending and also specific measures that can increase the financial sector's confidence and willingness to lend to bioenergy projects. Then, Catalina, the floor is with you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so first of all, I would like to thank the OECD for working on this amazing project and for making Bancolombia part of this. I would like to start saying that we have seen how it is increasingly important for private sector to accelerate actions focused on build back better, making economy sustainable, resilient, and inclusive, as well as regaining the confidence of dissatisfied citizens after what we have lived. As a main player in Colombian financial industry and relevant actor in Central America, we have got great knowledge of the realities all over the region, and we understand how, with our activity, we can generate a significant impact in the community. That is why we focus our business in Bancolombia and our actions in our corporate purpose to promote economic sustainable development, to achieve everyone's well-being, and we do it to promoting the strengthening of the productive network, building sustainable cities and communities, and promoting financial inclusion. Under this purpose, Bancolombia has put an effort to promote technological reconversion of its clients, as well as being a regular actor in the climate transition of the country, where we have a target of avoiding 9.3 million tons of CO2 by 2030. We have set as target to be the Bank of the Agriculture, where we have more than 200,000 customers in this segment, to which we provide financial and non-financial solutions. So in Bancolombia, we support our clients in the development of their projects, in which we promote the use of clean technologies, renewable energy, reduction of waste, emissions, and discharge, efficient use of energy, clean fuels, among others, to generate less impact on the environment and the community. And we also provide technical assistance, specialized suppliers, special credit lines, and help to canalize tax incentives, meaning that we go beyond our role as a bank. And also in bioenergy, we promote the development of business models that allow the reincorporation of waste in the production chain, which allows the development of new economic models that are much more competitive and innovative. In this sense, energy and efficiency, and particular bioenergy technology, are key part of this financing, and we strongly believe in the importance of developing these circular economy models we have seen today through all the presentation that promote the usage of biofuels in order to avoid emissions, reduce waste, and generate economic efficiency in agricultural customers. And that is why we provide more than financial solutions, as we believe we are responsible for helping to create an ecosystem of bioenergy. Okay, so in regards to the challenges, I won't go very deep because we have seen a lot from the different speakers today, but I will say that the lack of knowledge is a great challenge for bioenergy, and the lack of maturity of the market. Today, there is a great dispersion of agriculture production and low levels of technical knowledge, meaning that these small producers first need to enhance their productivity and think about implementing these kind of technologies after improving their own practices. So this poses a great challenge. Another challenge is the lack of financial institutions, which poses challenges access to formal credit lines and increased credit risk profiles. So I would like to close saying that in Bancolombia, we will continue improving and growing our commitment in this energy transition of the market, and that Bioenergy, with this study and our work with the OECD, we want to increase the coverage and our support, because we are aware that this requires having a great degree of technical knowledge, which we have been able to develop inside our organization and put for the service of our customers and other actors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to Catalina and to all our panelists, today panelists. Then I believe this is just a starting point to keep working together and to finally get all these bioenergy projects to get the finance and the financial closure, and finally to be able to commit to our NDC's goals. Then I will leave you with John for final remarks and for the closure of the event. John.
Thank you very much, Carolina, and thank you to all of our panelists, as well as to everyone listening in today. We appreciate your time. I realize that we're over schedule, and thank you to everyone for your patience in the beginning of the webinar as we started a bit late. Please let me also thank our colleagues from the government of Colombia, including Deputy Ambassador Gloria Alonso, for your opening remarks, as well as to the Ministry of Mines and Energy, including Mr. Julian Royas, for your participation in today's event. It's also worth noting, as mentioned earlier in the opening presentation, that we are very grateful for the cooperation with other ministries in Colombia, including the work with IPCEI and DNP. This has really been critical to the development of this report and its recommendations. I have shared with all of you in the links in the chat the Spanish and English links for the reports. This is possible for you to read free online. So it does have a download fee, but you can actually read all of this online for free. Please do feel free to share this with your networks. I realized that we didn't have time today to have any question and answer sessions, but as Carolina mentioned, we just see this as the beginning of conversations. We really look forward to continuing these discussions on opportunities to scale up the overall flows of capital for clean energy projects in Colombia, including bioenergy opportunities. Again, would like to thank all of you for participating in today's event. As noted in the chat, we have recorded today's session. We will be posting this online with the presentations for more information, and we'll send all of you the link to that once it is live on our webpage. So thank you again to everyone. A big thanks to our panelists for sharing your experiences and your thoughts on how to carry forward these opportunities in Colombia. And we look forward to speaking to all of you and continuing this conversation as we move forward together. Have a good day, everyone in Colombia, and to our participants here in Europe, thanks very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, John. Bye.
Gracias.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.